How many bombs does it take to destroy a country? Because that's actually a question someone had to answer. Generals sat in rooms, looked at maps, ran numbers, and came up with an answer. And then they dropped them. What happened to Vietnam was not a war. It was the largest aerial bombing campaign in the history of human conflict. The U.S. dropped 7 million tons of bombs across Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia during the Vietnam War era. To put that in context, in all of World War II, every bomb dropped by every country on every target, London, Berlin, Hiroshima, Dresden, all of it, came to around 2 million tons. America dropped 3.5 times that amount on this one region. But within Vietnam, there is one place that stands apart from everything else: Quang Tri province. Northern Vietnam, right on the border of what used to be North and South, smaller than the state of Delaware. Mostly rice farmers, 2 small towns, no major industry. In 1965, the U.S. launched Operation Rolling Thunder, a sustained bombing campaign against North Vietnam designed to cut off supply lines and break the will of the North Vietnamese government. The logic was that a small country with a limited industrial base couldn't absorb that level of punishment indefinitely. Eventually, they'd have to stop. Between 1965 and 1968, American aircraft flew over 300,000 attack zones. North Vietnam had anticipated this campaign. Fuel was dispersed in small drums hidden across the country. Roads and bridges were repaired within hours of being destroyed. Everything worth hitting was moved underground. The bombing didn't break North Vietnam. It made the supply effort more resilient. So the U.S. escalated. More sorties, larger bombs, new targets. The aircraft of choice to carry out this mission was the B-52s Stratofortress, which carried up to 108 bombs per aircraft, 60,000 pounds of ordnance. When a formation released their bombs over a target, everything in an area over a mile wide was destroyed. There was no precision. That wasn't the point. The point was total obliteration of an area. Survivors described hearing nothing. The bombs traveled faster than the speed of sound. The first indication an attack had happened was the ground moving. An example of one of these operations was in early 1968. North Vietnamese forces surrounded the U.S. Marine base at Khe Sanh in western Quang Tri. Roughly 20,000 troops encircling around 6,000 Marines. To defend the base, American B-52s dropped 100,000 tons of bombs on a 5-square-mile area around it over the course of the siege. This was the heaviest concentration of bombing on a single location in the history of warfare. And then it kept going. Through 1972, through the Easter Offensive, through the battle to retake Quang Tri City, the bombing never stopped. Until finally the war ended in 1975. Roughly 30% of everything dropped, failed to detonate on impact. Cluster munitions, artillery shells, 500-pound bombs. They went into the ground and stayed there. In Quang Tri province today, an estimated 500,000 tons of unexploded ordnance is still buried in the soil. Since 1975, more than 40,000 Vietnamese people have been killed by these weapons. The majority of them had nothing to do with the war. Many of them weren't alive when it happened. Vietnam today is not the country those bombs were meant to create. It recovered. The economy grew. The cities are functioning and, in some cases, thriving. But Quang Tri is still Quang Tri. The war was never really stopped. In the school playgrounds, in the rice paddies, in the ponds at the edges of villages. The most bombed place on earth doesn't look like a war zone anymore. That's almost